So get this, podcast listeners. The FBI launches voting machine investigations in Colorado. So the FBI is launching a voting machine investigation in Colorado, and it joins a probe into the elections equipment password breach. So there are a couple of articles about this, and the one I'm going to read is actually from The Hill. The Hill's headline is, FBI is assisting in investigation of QAnon Colorado video. You have to hear this article to really kind of follow what's going on here. The FBI has joined a Colorado District Attorney's Office investigation into how voting machine login information wound up on a QAnon-affiliated video, CNN reported. Courtney Bernal, an FBI spokesperson for the Denver field office, told CNN that the agency is assisting Mesa County District Attorney Dan Rubenstein's office, quote, on the forensic review and analysis of county voting systems to determine if there was a potential federal criminal violation. Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold launched an investigation last week into photos that appear to show passwords for Dominion voting systems software specific to Mesa County's voting systems, and it was posted online. The photos were posted on a QAnon affiliated Telegram channel, as well as on a conservative blog. Dominion told The Hill newspaper that the company is also fully cooperating with the authorities on this matter. Griswold blamed Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters, accusing her of bringing a non-employee to a meeting where voting machine credentials were visible. The meeting in question was a trustee build described as a routine meeting between county and state officials to update voting machine software, CNN reports. I think this is troubling for the entire state of Colorado to have someone in a trusted position, literally trusted to protect democracy, allow this situation to occur, Griswold said last week. To be clear, Mesa County clerk and recorder allowed a security breach and, by all evidence at this point, assisted in it. A video posted on Telegram claimed that the individual who provided the login information was a Dominion employee. I want to repeat this. A video posted on Telegram claimed that the individual who provided the login information was a Dominion employee, the manufacturer of the voting machines. Dominion told CNN that the individual was no longer employed at the company. So, folks, more information about the Dominion voting machines, and this is from The Hill. We're not talking about some out there newspaper that may not have a great reputation, maybe right sometimes, or really has an axe to grind. This is The Hill newspaper. It's a legitimate newspaper, and it's certainly worth looking into. And what it does is it raises all these question marks. It sure does. And we've said this 100 times, and so have so many others. It just makes you wonder. Also, in the Patriot Journal, they have also reported the same thing. And then in the AP, Associated Press, FBI joins criminal probe in Colorado. Voting equipment breach. There's a voting equipment breach. And then in the Wall Street Journal, they have an opinion article from the editorial board, the entire editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. A fix for Atlanta's voting problems. A Fulton County probe could end in a state takeover or reform. As Georgia probes Fulton County's election, the best response from partisans would be to take a deep breath. This is about accountability for a long record of mistakes. It isn't about President Trump's specious fraud claims, and it isn't a threat to democracy. This is according to the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. The State Board of Elections on Wednesday in Fulton County, Georgia, named a bipartisan panel to do a performance review of Fulton County, which includes most of Atlanta. The process could eventually lead, under Georgia's new voting law, to a suspension of Fulton's Board of Elections. Democrats say the exercise is a GOP plot to disenfranchise Atlanta. But the law specifies a long, detailed process. First comes the performance review. Two of the new panel's members are election officials from other parts of the state, including a Democrat from neighboring Gwinnett County. The third is Ryan Germany, the general counsel for the Secretary of State, best known nationally for rejecting Mr. Trump's fraud claims on that infamous taped phone call. The law says the review panel must issue a report with evaluations, judgments, and recommendations. The state elections board may then investigate and hold hearings. Suspension finally comes only if Fulton board is found to have repeatedly violated election rules and regulations or demonstrated nonfeasance, malfeasance, or gross negligence. So what I find interesting about this op-ed is Ryan Germany, the general counsel for the Secretary of State, who's best known for rejecting Donald Trump's fraud claims. He is one of the people that's looking into this. Well, if there wasn't a problem, then why did the General Assembly in Georgia and the governor of Georgia pass a new law, and then the governor signed the law that looks at places like Fulton County's mismanagement of the election system and maybe outright cheating, and maybe outright fraud and malfeasance? But why would that even be looked at if there wasn't a potential problem? So this is what I find interesting. We're finding out, and that's the purpose of this segment in the podcast, we're finding out all of this information that's coming out little by little about all the areas that we were told where there were potential issues in the election, whether it be with Dominion machines, potentially, whether it be with cheating and malfeasance, potentially, in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere. And now what we're finding out is there are detailed investigations by the FBI in Colorado and now by the state of Georgia in Fulton County, which is Atlanta, about whether or not there was cheating. And so if you talk to someone and they're really upset about the election and they're concerned about its integrity and they want voter ID or they want other kinds of changes, maybe it's time that you start reading a little bit. If you disagree with them, maybe it's time that you start reading a little bit and realizing that, fraud does occur. Case in point, in the Daily Wire, a city councilman and 5 others in California are charged with election fraud. Compton City Councilman Isaac Galvin and 5 others have been charged with election fraud. According to a press release from Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon issued Friday, Galvin and former Compton City Council candidate Jace Dawson allegedly worked together to help Galvin retain his District 2 seat. Galvin, who unsuccessfully ran for the California State Senate District 35 as a Democrat in 2016, won the city councilman spot in a tight election over challenger Andre Spicer by 1 vote. By 1 vote. Dawson is charged with trying to bribe a registrar employee on election night as the employee was counting ballots. Democrats, it's like the voting never stops, it even continues after the votes were cast, and even they go up to and I'm sure this was probably happening in Fulton County, Georgia, right? And Mesa County as well, probably. Quote, while we do not have all the details regarding the charges brought against Councilman Galvin, the city takes any charges of election fraud extremely seriously, said Compton Mayor Emma Sharif. Yeah, sure you do. Of course you do. And notice these things are always found out after the fact. After the fact. So in the National Pulse, a magazine I'll admit that I don't know a whole lot about, but I did look this up and it is so. I did confirm it. Top anti-audit Democrats. So the top Democrats in America who are congressmen and congresswomen, they don't like these audits that the Trump people are putting together across the country. They're very much against them. They're very vocal against them. And they're elected Democrats. They all happen to take trips to China, which were sponsored by the Communist Party and influencers. So here's what it says. New Deal leaders, a network of progressive state and local officials, including those suppressing audits of the 2020 election. So it actually is state and federal officials, by the way. It's not just federal officials. has collaborated extensively with a Chinese Communist Party-backed influence group seeking to neutralize opposition to the regime, the National Pulse has revealed. Alumni of the program include Joe Biden's Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and failed Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, no surprise there. Among the current chairs of the coalition, which identifies, cultivates, and provides policy support to a network of 175 rising state and local Democrats, is Delaware Senator Chris Coons, dubbed the Biden Whisperer and a power player. So it's like the Biden sniffer. Among the president's inner circle by Politico. New Deal leaders include several high-profile Democrat leaders involved in the suppression of the 2020 election audits, such as Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and former Maricopa County Recorder Adrian Fontes. All three officials spoke at the group's 2021 annual Leaders Conference. So the article continues and documents the fact that all these individuals were sponsored by, guess what? This particular Chinese influence group. And they did so willingly. Obviously, no one made them do this. And it just so happens that the same group of elected officials at the state and federal level are all Democrats, and they are vigorously working against the audits that are occurring by Donald Trump. Why would you be afraid of audits? Why would you, I mean, of course, I'm afraid of an IRS audit. Who isn't? But why would you be afraid of public audits of books and of voting machines and of votes and of ballots cast and so forth? What is the fear? What are you really afraid of? Why would you fight against that? What possibly could be the motivation? And why on earth would you take a trip sponsored by and paid for by, the communist government of China, ultimately? Doesn't that look a little suspicious? And doesn't that just raise even more concerns? And why do you think America is so divided when they see these things? You got Democrats who are cheating, clearly. You have Democrats who don't want transparency after the fact. If they had transparency and we found out that everything was fine, everybody would be good, but don't even want transparency. No transparency, none. No voter ID, none of that stuff. It's just not allowed.